I scanned the crowd for faces that were currently smiling in a beach selfie 1,000 miles away. My parents assumed I would swallow the hurt of them missing my graduation like I always did. They were wrong. That empty seat did not break me. It just made it very easy to sign away $500,000 to a family that actually knew the meaning of love. My name is Evelyn Moore. I was 29 years old, a woman grown from the quiet, rusted soil of Riverset, Ohio. Yet I still felt like a child waiting for permission to speak. I stood before the bathroom mirror in my cramped apartment, smoothing the fabric of my graduation gown. This was it. I was the first person in my bloodline to earn a master's degree. I had done it on a full scholarship, working nights, never asking for a cent, fueled by the naive belief that excellence would finally force my parents to look at me. I had sent the invitation 6 months ago. I had reminded them every week for the last 2 months. I had offered to pay for their gas, even though my bank account hovered in the double digits. At 7 in the morning, my phone vibrated against the porcelain sink. I picked it up, expecting a text saying they were on the highway. Instead, a message from my mother lit up the screen. "We won't be able to make it." That was all it said. No explanation, no apology, no promise to make it up to me. Just 5 words to dismiss 2 years of sleepless nights and grueling academic labor. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, my hands trembling. I needed to understand. I needed a reason. My thumb hovered over the Instagram icon, a habit born of masochism. I opened the app and refreshed the feed. The first image was a punch to the gut. It was a check-in at Coral Bay, Florida. The colors were blindingly bright turquoise water, white sand, and the sun-flushed faces of my parents. And there, right in the center, was my younger sister, Lila Moore. She was wearing a new bikini, holding a drink with a tiny umbrella, flanked by our parents who looked happier than I had seen them in a decade. The caption read, "Surprise trip for our baby girl. She has been so stressed lately, she needed the ocean air." Lila had quit her part-time job at a boutique 3 weeks ago because standing up for 4 hours was too hard. That was her stress. My stress was defending a thesis while working full-time. But I was not the one in Florida. I drove to the university alone. The auditorium was a chaotic sea of pride. I watched fathers adjusting the tassels on their daughters' caps. I saw mothers weeping into handkerchiefs, holding bouquets of roses that probably cost $50. I found my seat and stared straight ahead. When the dean announced my name, Evelyn Moore, I walked across the stage. The applause was polite, the kind strangers offer to fill the silence. I looked out into the crowd, my eyes involuntarily darting to the section where I had reserved 3 seats. They were empty, 3 dark voids in a room full of light. "Congratulations," the dean said as he handed me the diploma folder. "Thank you," I said, my voice mechanical. I walked off the stage and found a corner near the exit. I checked my phone again. Another photo had gone up. They were eating seafood at a beachside restaurant. My father had his arm around Lila. A classmate, Sarah, bumped into me. She was holding a balloon that said, "You did it. Hey, Evelyn. Where is your family? I wanted to meet them." I felt a constriction in my throat, a physical pain that made it hard to breathe. I forced a smile that felt like it might crack my face. Well, they had a car trouble. I lied, the words tasting like ash. They are heartbroken. They couldn't make it." "Oh, that is awful," Sarah said, her face falling. "At least they are with you in spirit." Right, I said. In spirit. As she walked away to hug her parents, the dam inside me began to crack. I thought about my 16th birthday. I had spent it alone because Lila had a breakup and needed comforting. I thought about the time I was 22 and moved into my first apartment. Nobody came to help because Lila needed a ride to a concert. It was not an accident. It was a pattern. I was the reliable one, the sturdy furniture in the background of their lives. Lila was the art piece they admired. I looked at the diploma in my hand. It was proof of my worth to the world, but to the people who made me, it was less interesting than a weekend at the beach. Am I just the extra person in this family? I whispered to no one. The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswered, for the first time. I did not make an excuse for them. I did not tell myself they were busy or tired. I looked at the empty seats, and then at the photo of them laughing in Florida, and I felt something inside me shift. It was not sadness anymore. It was cold, hard clarity. The drive back from the graduation ceremony was quiet, the kind of silence that allows ghosts to speak. I sat in my apartment, staring at the diploma on my table, and the memories did not come as a flood. They came as a meticulously itemized receipt, a ledger of debts and deficits that I had been keeping in the back of my mind for 20 years. The inequality was not a sudden accident. It was the architecture of our lives. I remembered the summer I turned 16. While other girls were at the pool, I was sweating through a polyester uniform at the local diner, scraping half-eaten burgers into a trash bin. I needed money for a used laptop because the school library closed too early for me to finish my AP coursework. I saved every quarter, hiding them in a hollowed-out book on my shelf. 2 months later, Lila turned 16. I came home from a double shift, my feet throbbing, to find a brand-new silver sedan sitting in the driveway with a red bow on the hood. I walked into the kitchen, the smell of fryer grease still clinging to my hair. "You bought her a car?" I asked, my voice flat. My mother didn't even look up from the cake she was frosting. "Lila needs it. Evelyn. She has cheer practice and piano lessons. She cannot be walking around in the dark." "I walk home in the dark every night," I said. My father chimed in from the living room, laughing as he watched TV. "You are tough. Evie, you have street smarts. Lila is. She is different. She is delicate. The world would eat her alive if we didn't protect her." That was the narrative. I was the cactus, able to survive in a drought. Lila was the orchid, requiring a greenhouse and constant watering. When I was accepted into the state university, my parents sat me down at the kitchen table. They looked solemn, like they were delivering bad news. "We are so proud," my dad said, wringing his hands. "But the business has been slow. We cannot help you with tuition. You are smart, though. You will figure out the loans." I did figure it out. I worked 3 jobs. I skipped meals. I graduated with honors and a mountain of debt that I paid off by eating instant noodles for 3 years. 2 years later, Lila decided to go to a private art college out of state. The tuition was triple what mine had been. My parents took out a second mortgage. When Lila dropped out after 1 semester because she didn't vibe with the professors, she came home with $5,000 in credit card debt from shopping sprees. I was visiting for the weekend when the bill collector called. My father hung up the phone, looking pale. "We have to pay it," he told my mother. "We cannot let her credit score be ruined before she even starts her life." "What about my loans?" I asked. I couldn't help it. The words just slipped out. My mother sighed, a sound that always made me feel like a burden. "Evelyn, why do you always have to make everything about you? You have a job. You are fine. Your sister is struggling to find herself." Then came the direct withdrawals. It started when I got my first salaried position. A phone call on a Tuesday night. "Evie, honey." My mom's voice was sweet, dripping with that specific anxiety she used as a weapon. "We are a little short on the electric bill this month. The rates went up. Can you send $200 just until Dad gets his bonus?" I sent it. I told myself it was my duty. I told myself that good daughters help their aging parents, but the bonus never seemed to come. The requests became a monthly ritual. The water heater broke. Lila needed a deposit for an apartment because she wanted to move out. The car needed a transmission. "I really can't this month." "Mom," I said once, staring at my own overdue car insurance bill. "Oh, she said, her voice trembling. I understand. I guess. I guess we will just turn the heat down. I hope Dad's arthritis doesn't flare up too bad in the cold. The guilt was a physical weight, pressing on my chest until I couldn't breathe. Fine, I snapped. I will send it. You are an angel. Evie, she said, the tremble vanishing instantly. I don't know what we would do without you. I looked at the photos on my phone again. The Florida sun, the drinks, the smiles. They weren't struggling. They weren't poor. They were just poor when it came to me. They had drained me dry, dollar by dollar, emotional brick by emotional brick, to build a pedestal for Lila. And I had let them. I sat there in the dark, the realization settling over me like a layer of ice. I wasn't a member of this family. I was its sponsor. The phone rang 4 times before she picked up. Through the speaker, I could hear the distinct, chaotic sounds of a beachside restaurant clinking silverware, the roar of laughter, and the distant rhythmic crash of waves. Hello. Her voice was bright, breathless, and completely unbothered. You are in Florida, I said. It was not a question. Oh, Evelyn, she sighed, the brightness dimming only slightly. I was going to call you later. The reception here is spotty. You texted me at 7 in the morning. You said you couldn't come. I know. It was a last-minute decision. Lila, she was in a bad place. Evie, really dark. She called us crying yesterday morning. She just felt so overwhelmed with everything. She needed to get away. You know how sensitive she is. I gripped the phone tighter. I graduated today, Mom. I walked across the stage an hour ago. I was the only person in my row who didn't have anyone cheering for them. Don't be dramatic, she snapped, her tone shifting instantly from defensive to dismissive. We are so proud of you, obviously. We know you did great, but Lila needed us right now. This trip is good for her. She is finally smiling again. You should see her. Did you even remember what time the ceremony started? There was a pause on the other end. Look, let's talk when we get back next week. We will do a dinner, just us. Okay, I have to go. The waiter is bringing the appetizers. Lila ordered the lobster. Mom, love you. Bye. The line went dead. She did not ask if I was okay. She did not ask if I had received my honors cord. She did not apologize. She just wanted to get back to the lobster. I lowered the phone and stared at the black screen. The silence in my apartment usually felt safe, but tonight it felt sterile. My thumb moved automatically to our message history. I started scrolling up. I went back months, then years. Can you transfer $50? The electric bill is high. Lila needs a dress for a wedding. Can you chip in? Dad's truck broke down again. We can't make it to your birthday dinner. Something came up. Need $200 for groceries. It was not a conversation history. It was a ledger of extraction. I was not a daughter to them. I was an insurance policy. I was the safety net they used so they could afford to let Lila fall as many times as she wanted. For the first time in my life, the tears did not come. Usually, this was the part where I cried until my head pounded, wondering why I wasn't lovable enough to warrant their time. I would twist myself into knots trying to justify their behavior. They are stressed. They are aging. They do the best they can. But tonight, my eyes were dry. My chest felt hollow, carved out by a cold, sharp instrument. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Their absence was not an accident. It was a choice. They chose the beach. They chose the lobster. They chose Lila. They chose themselves. I walked over to my laptop and opened my banking portal. The screen glowed blue in the dim room. There was a scheduled transfer set for the first of the month. $300. It was a significant chunk of my paycheck. Money I should have been putting into a retirement fund or saving for a house. Instead, it went to them. Every single month. Like a tax for existing. I looked at the cursor hovering over the cancel button. They are eating lobster in Coral Bay, I said aloud. The words hung in the air, stripping away the last shreds of my guilt. They could afford plane tickets. They could afford a hotel with an ocean view. They could afford to drop everything on a whim. They did not need my $300 for groceries. They never did. I clicked cancel. A pop-up window appeared. Are you sure you want to stop this recurring payment? I clicked. Yes. I waited for the panic. I waited for the crushing weight of obligation to suffocate me, but it didn't. Instead, a strange, cool sensation washed over me. It was the feeling of a rope snapping. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from my dad. Hope it went well. Send photos. I deleted the message. I turned off my phone. I sat in the dark, and for the first time in 29 years, I did not feel like a disappointment. I felt dangerous. The metal lockbox under my bed was covered in a thin layer of dust. I pulled it out, the metal scraping against the hardwood floor with a harsh, grinding sound. Inside lay the only thing that gave me leverage, though my parents had no idea just how much leverage it actually was. It was the legal paperwork for the Beatrice Moore Trust. My great-aunt Beatrice had been the black sheep of the family. She was a woman of sharp tongue and even sharper observation skills. She had never married, had invested wisely in real estate during the 80s, and had died 10 years ago with a net worth that made my father's eyes bulge. She had detested my parents. She called my father a spineless grifter and my mother a professional martyr. But she had liked me. She saw me doing homework at the kitchen table while Lila threw tantrums for new toys, and she would wink at me. When she passed, she left a specific fund $500,000. The existence of the money was not a secret. My parents knew about it. In fact, they talked about it constantly. For the last decade, they had treated that trust fund like a delayed lottery win. They had already mentally spent it. They planned to pay off the second mortgage, buy a vacation home, and, of course, help Lila get settled. It is ridiculous that she locked it up for 10 years. My father had complained just last month during a phone call. But when it releases this summer, we can finally breathe. You will cut the check to the joint account. Right. Evie. It is complicated. Dad. I had said, deflecting him as usual. It is not complicated. He had snapped. It is family money. It belongs to us. They assumed that because I was the executor, the trustee named specifically by Aunt Beatrice, my job was simply to sign the check when the clock ran out. They believed my role was clerical. They thought I was just the secretary holding the pen. I sat on the floor and opened the heavy folder. The scent of old paper wafted up. I needed to be sure. I needed a reason. I needed to read the words again, not with the eyes of a scared daughter trying to keep the peace, but with the eyes of someone who had just been abandoned on her graduation day. I turned to page 14, paragraph 3. This was the clause that governed the distribution of the assets. My finger traced the lines of text. The trustee shall have the sole and absolute discretion to distribute the principal sum of $500,000 to a deserving family that demonstrates values of integrity, hard work, and mutual respect. The definition of family shall not be limited by blood relations, but shall be determined by the trustee's judgment of character and need. I read it twice. Then a third time. My parents had never seen this document. They had only been told the amount and the release date. They assumed deserving family meant our family. They assumed the money was an inheritance. But Aunt Beatrice had been smarter than that. She had not written a will leaving money to her nephew. She had created a charitable trust with a very broad mandate, and she had made me the sole judge and jury. I sat back against the bed frame. The realization was cold and heavy in my stomach. Legally, I could give this money to anyone. I could give it to a neighbor. I could give it to a stranger. As long as I could justify that they were a deserving family with integrity. The law was on my side. My phone lit up on the nightstand. It was a text from Lila. Mom said you are being weird. Don't ruin the vibe. We are going jet skiing tomorrow. Send money for the rental if you want to be nice. I looked at the text, then back at the document. Integrity, hard work, and mutual respect. My family possessed none of these things. They felt entitled to my labor, my time, and now, this money. They were waiting for a payout they had not earned, to fund a lifestyle they could not sustain, for a daughter who refused to work. You knew, didn't you? Aunt B. I whispered to the empty room. You knew they would never change. I closed the folder. The decision wasn't fully made yet, but the path was clear. The money was not theirs. It never had been. It was a test. And for 10 years, I had watched them fail it every single day. Now, I held the pen, and for the first time, I realized I didn't have to write the name Moore on the check. The silence in my apartment had become suffocating, so I threw myself into volunteer work at the local community center. I told myself it was to build my resume, but in truth, I was looking for proof that good families actually existed. That was how I met the Harrises. They walked into the small consultation office on a rainy Tuesday evening. David Harris was a tall man with shoulders slumped from exhaustion, wearing a mechanic's uniform stained with oil. His wife, Sarah, was in a wheelchair, her head wrapped in a colorful scarf that could not quite hide the gauntness of her face. Between them was their daughter, Maya, a 17-year-old girl with eyes that held a mixture of fierce intelligence and deep, abiding worry. "I am so sorry we are late," David said, his voice ragged. "The bus." The lift for the wheelchair was stuck. We had to wait for the next one. "It is completely fine," I said, gesturing for them to sit. I had reviewed their file before they arrived. Sarah was battling stage 4 ovarian cancer. The medical bills had decimated their savings, and David was working double shifts just to keep the lights on. I expected them to ask for emergency assistance, for food vouchers, or help with utility bills. David cleared his throat, his hands clasping Sarah's hand tightly on the armrest of her chair. "We are not here for money," he said, his tone proud but polite. "We know the center has limited funds. We are here for Maya." Maya looked down at her sneakers. "I got into the state university," she said quietly. "But we don't know how to navigate the financial aid forms. My dad, well, he is great with cars, but the paperwork is confusing. We just want her to have a chance," Sarah whispered. Her voice was weak, but her eyes were burning with intensity. "She studies every night in the hospital waiting room. She never complains. She deserves to fly." I spent the next 2 hours going through documents with them. I watched the way they interacted. When Sarah started coughing, a dry, painful sound that seemed to rattle her bones, David didn't sigh or roll his eyes. He immediately stopped talking, poured her water, and rubbed her back with a tenderness that made my chest ache. "I am okay, Davy," she said, squeezing his hand. "Focus on the lady. Focus on Maya." "You are my focus," he replied simply. It was a small moment, insignificant to them, but it shattered me. I thought of my mother complaining that my father chewed too loudly. I thought of my father ignoring my mother's birthday because he was too busy. I thought of the conditional love I had grown up with, where affection was a currency you earned by being convenient. At the end of the session, Maya looked at me with wide, admiring eyes. "You have a master's degree, right?" she asked. "That is so cool. I hope I can be like you one day." "Meaning?" "Independent. Smart. You are already smarter than I was at your age," I told her. "Thank you for treating us with respect," David said as he stood up to wheel his wife out. "Most people, they just see the wheelchair and the dirty uniform." I sat in the empty office long after they had left. The contrast was absolute. My parents had health, wealth, and freedom, yet they used it to indulge themselves and neglect their children. The Harris family had sickness, poverty, and struggle, yet they used every ounce of energy to uplift each other. A thought began to form in my mind. It was dangerous. It was radical. It was exactly what Aunt Beatrice would have done. I didn't go home. Instead, I drove straight to the office of Mr. Sterling, the estate attorney. It was late, but he agreed to see me when I told him it was urgent. I sat in his leather chair, my hands folded in my lap to hide their shaking. "I have made a decision regarding the Beatrice Moore Trust," I said. Mr. Sterling adjusted his glasses. "Excellent. I assume you want to draft the check for your parents? The term expires in 3 weeks." "No," I said, my voice steadying. "I want to draft a new beneficiary agreement. I have found a family that actually fits Aunt Beatrice's definition." Mr. Sterling paused, his pen hovering over the notepad. "Evelyn, you understand that this is irrevocable once you sign the rights over to a third party. Your parents cannot claim a cent. This is $500,000 we are talking about." "I know," I said. I thought of Lila drinking cocktails on the beach while I stood alone on the stage. Then I thought of David Harris wiping his hands on his greasy pants before gently holding his sick wife's hand. "Draw up the papers," I said. "I am ready." It was 3 days after I canceled the recurring transfer when they showed up. They did not call first. I heard a heavy, insistent pounding on my apartment door at 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning. When I opened it, my entire immediate family was standing in the hallway, looking like a storm front that had finally made landfall. My mother pushed past me without waiting for an invitation. My father followed, his face flushed a mottled red. Lila trailed behind them, scrolling on her phone, looking bored but vaguely annoyed, as if being dragged to my apartment was a violation of her human rights. "We need to talk," my father said, not bothering to remove his shoes. He marched into the center of my small living room and gestured for everyone to sit. I remained standing by the door. "You could have called. You stopped the payment," my mother said. She sat on the edge of my sofa, clutching her designer handbag like a shield. "The bank notification came through yesterday. Insufficient funds, no. Canceled by user." That is what it said. Canceled. I did cancel it, I said calmly. "Why?" she demanded, her voice rising an octave. "You know we rely on that for the utilities. Do you want us to sit in the dark? Do you want your father to freeze? You just got back from a week in Coral Bay," I said. I saw the photos. The hotel alone cost more than my rent for 3 months. If you can afford that, you can afford your own electric bill. Lila looked up from her phone, rolling her eyes. "Oh my God, are you still hung up on the graduation thing? It's been a week." "Evelyn, get over yourself." "Lila, hush," my father said, though his tone lacked any real reprimand. He turned to me, trying to compose his features into a mask of paternal authority. "Look, Evie, we know you are upset. Maybe we should have communicated better about the trip. But punishing us financially is immature, especially with the big day coming up." I crossed my arms. "What big day?" "The release of the Beatrice Moore Trust," he said, as if I were slow. "The 10-year mark is next Tuesday. That is $500,000. Evelyn, we need to discuss how to allocate it. I have some debts to clear, and your mother wants to renovate the kitchen. And, obviously, we need to set Lila up so she stops. Well, so she finds her footing." Lila perked up. "I found a condo downtown. It has a rooftop pool. Dad said the trust would cover the down payment and the first year of fees." I looked at them. They had already spent the money. They had carved up the carcass of Aunt Beatrice's legacy before it was even cold. "No," I said. The room went silent. The hum of the refrigerator seemed incredibly loud. "What did you say?" my mother asked, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I said no," I repeated, my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. "I am not signing the check over to you. I am not buying a condo for Lila. I am not paying off debts you incurred from vacations you couldn't afford." My father stood up, his face darkening. "You listen to me, young lady. That is family money. It belongs to us. You are just the executor. You don't get to play God just because you are bitter about a graduation ceremony." It is not about the ceremony, I said. It is about 29 years of being the backup plan. It is about you taking everything from me and giving it to her. I pointed at Lila. Lila scoffed, standing up to join the fray. You are so selfish, you always have been. You think you are better than us because you have some fancy degree. You are just jealous because Mom and Dad actually like hanging out with me. You are boring, Evelyn. You are cold and boring, and now you are trying to steal our money to punish us. Lila is right, my mother said, tears instantly springing to her eyes, a practiced performance I had seen 1,000 times. We raised you, we fed you, we clothed you. How can you stand there and deny your own flesh and blood after everything we sacrificed? You sacrificed nothing, I said. You are being hysterical. My father spat. I will not let you steal this inheritance. If you don't transfer that money to the joint account by Tuesday, there will be consequences. You understand. We are not asking. Evelyn, we are telling you. I hear you. I said. I hear you loud and clear. I walked to the door and held it open. We are done talking. I said. My father stared at me, his jaw working as if he wanted to scream, but something in my expression stopped him. He had never seen me like this. He was used to the Evelyn who folded, the Evelyn who apologized, the Evelyn who just wanted to be loved. That Evelyn was not in the room. You will come to your senses. He growled as he brushed past me. You always do. Don't expect a Christmas card. Lila sneered as she walked out. My mother stopped in the doorway, looking at me with a mix of pity and malice. You are going to end up very lonely. Evelyn, money doesn't keep you warm at night. Neither do parents who don't care about you. I said. I shut the door in her face. I locked the deadbolt. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally cutting the cord. They thought this was a negotiation. They thought I was holding out for an apology. They had no idea that I had already visited the lawyer. They had no idea the money was already gone. The Tuesday morning sun was streaming through the blinds of Mr. Sterling's office, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. On the mahogany desk sat a stack of documents about an inch thick. They were the most expensive papers I had ever touched, and they were about to change the trajectory of 2 families forever. Mr. Sterling sat opposite me, his hands clasped on top of a legal pad. He looked serious, perhaps even a little nervous on my behalf. I need to go over this one last time. Evelyn, he said, his voice grave. Once the ink dries on this signature page, the assets are transferred irrevocably. The trust is dissolved into the new beneficiary structure. There is no undo button. You cannot wake up tomorrow and decide you want the money back for yourself or for your parents. I understand, I said. I had never felt more lucid in my life. The terms are exactly as you dictated, he continued, tapping the paper with his index finger. $200,000 is allocated immediately to a restricted medical trust for Sarah Harris to cover oncology treatments, hospice care if needed, and any experimental therapies insurance denies. $150,000 goes into an educational trust for Maya Harris, payable to any accredited university. The remaining $150,000 is a general hardship fund for the family's housing and living expenses, administered by my firm to ensure proper usage. I looked at the breakdown. It was not just money. It was chemotherapy without bankruptcy. It was a college degree without crippling debt. It was a roof that wouldn't disappear. It looks perfect, I said. Your parents will likely challenge this. Mr. Sterling warned. They will claim you violated your fiduciary duty. They might even claim you were mentally unstable or coerced. Let them try, I said. Aunt Beatrice's clause was clear. A deserving family. I am fulfilling her wishes to the letter. My parents simply assumed the definition applied to them. They were wrong. I picked up the heavy fountain pen. My hand was steady. For years, my hands had shaken whenever I had to sign a check for my mother or hand over cash to my father. The anxiety of never being enough had lived in my fingertips, but today, my hand was as still as stone. I signed my name, Evelyn Moore, trustee, at the bottom of the final page. The scratch of the nib against the paper sounded like a lock clicking shut. Mr. Sterling took the papers, notarized the signature, and placed them into a folder. "It is done," he said softly. "The transfer has been initiated electronically. The funds should clear into the new accounts within 3 business days." "Thank you," I said, "for everything." I walked out of the law firm and into the bright afternoon. I expected to feel fear. I expected the old conditioning to kick in, the voice in my head screaming that I was a bad daughter, a traitor, a thief. But there was nothing, just a profound, quiet lightness. I did not call the Harris family yet. Mr. Sterling would handle the official notification in due time, and I certainly did not call my parents. For the next 2 weeks, I lived in the eye of the storm. My phone was a constant source of noise that I simply ignored. My father left voicemails that started with forced cheerfulness and ended with veiled threats. "Evie, honey, pick up the phone. We need to finalize the account details for the transfer." 2 days later, Evelyn, "This is ridiculous. Stop playing games." 4 days later, "If you don't call me back by noon, I am driving over there and breaking your door down." I didn't block them. I just watched the notifications roll in like waves crashing against a cliff, breaking harmlessly against the stone. I went to work. I bought groceries. I slept 8 hours a night. I knew the explosion was coming. I knew that the moment the bank informed them the trust account was closed and the balance was 0, the world would catch fire. But for now, I enjoyed the silence. It was the silence of a bridge that had been burned, leaving me safe on the other side. The explosion did not happen in person. It happened digitally, a nuclear detonation transmitted through cellular towers and fiber optic cables. I was sitting at my desk at work when my phone, which I had placed face down, began to vibrate with such intensity that it rattled against the wood. It did not stop. It was a continuous, angry buzz. I turned it over. The screen was a blur of notifications. 43 missed calls, 20 voicemails, 100 text messages. The bank had sent the rejection notice to my father's joint account attempt. They had been informed that the trust was empty. I picked up the phone and answered the incoming call from my father. I didn't say hello. I just listened. "You thief!" he screamed, his voice distorting the speaker. "You ungrateful, spiteful little... What did you do? Where is the money?" "The banker said the account is closed. He said the funds were disbursed to a third party." "That is correct," I said, my voice calm in the center of his hurricane. "Who did you give it to?" My mother's voice shrieked in the background. She must have been wrestling for the phone. "Did you transfer it to yourself? We will sue you. We will put you in jail." "Evelyn, that is embezzlement." "It is not embezzlement," I said. "It is the execution of a trust according to the grantor's wishes." "I am coming over there," my father roared. "I am going to drag you to the bank by your hair if I have to." I hung up. 10 minutes later, a notification from Facebook popped up. A friend had sent me a screenshot. It was a post from Lila. She had posted a picture of us from years ago with a long, rambling caption. "Please pray for my sister Evelyn. She is having a severe mental health crisis. She has stolen our family inheritance and is suffering from delusions. We are so worried about her. If you see her, please tell her to come home. We just want to get her help. It was brilliant, in a sick way. She was trying to discredit me before I could speak. She was painting me as unstable so that if I tried to explain the abuse, people would just think it was part of my delusions." I did not comment on the post. I did not engage in a public war. Instead, I composed a single email addressed to my parents and Lila. I attached the scanned document of the Beatrice Moore Trust, specifically highlighting the clause about the deserving family. I also attached the receipt of the transfer to the Harris Family Trust, redacted to protect their privacy, but clear enough to show the money was gone. I added one line of text: "The money is gone. The decision is legal and final. Any further harassment will be met with a restraining order." I hit send. The phone stopped ringing for exactly 10 minutes. They were reading it. They were processing the reality that the $500,000 they had mentally spent on condos and kitchen renovations was now paying for a stranger's chemotherapy. Then the phone rang again. It was my mother. I debated ignoring it, but I needed to hear the shift. I needed to hear them break. Evie. Her voice was no longer shrieking. It was small, trembling, wet with tears. "Evie, please, tell me this is a joke." "It is not a joke." But why?" she sobbed. "We are your family. We are your blood. How could you give our money to strangers? We are drowning here. Honey, Dad owes people money. If we don't get that trust, we might lose the house. You wouldn't do that to us, would you? You wouldn't let your own parents be homeless. You have a vacation home," I said. "Sell it. That is our retirement," she wailed. "Evie, please, we can work this out. We can split it. Just get the money back. Tell the lawyer you made a mistake. We will forgive you. We will forgive everything. Just fix it." There it was, the pivot. They went from threatening to jail me to begging for my help in the span of an hour. But even in her begging, the truth was naked. She didn't say, "I miss you." She didn't say, "I am sorry we hurt you." She said, "We will forgive you," as if I were the one who had sinned. They were not mourning the loss of a daughter. They were mourning the loss of a paycheck. "I can't get it back," I said. "And even if I could, I wouldn't." "You are a monster," she whispered, the venom returning instantly when she realized the manipulation wasn't working. I wish I had never. I hung up. I didn't wait for her to finish that sentence. I knew how it ended. I went into my settings. I blocked my mother. I blocked my father. I blocked Lila. I blocked their emails. I blocked their social media accounts. I sat there in my office chair, staring at the wall. I expected to feel grief. I expected to feel the phantom limb of the family I had just amputated from my life. But I didn't. I felt the way a survivor feels when they finally crawl out of the wreckage of a car crash. I was bruised. I was battered. But I was free. The sacrificial daughter was dead. The Bank of Evelyn was closed forever. Riverset was a small town, and in small towns, the truth has a way of seeping through the cracks like groundwater. Lila had tried to control the narrative with her vague Facebook posts about my mental instability, but she had underestimated the power of concrete evidence and the transparency of desperation. The tide turned at a family barbecue I did not attend. My cousin Sarah, the one who had seen me alone at graduation, apparently asked my mother where I was. When my mother launched into a rehearsed speech about my breakdown, Sarah asked a simple question that unraveled everything. She asked why. If I was having a breakdown. I was the one with a stable job and a master's degree while Lila was selling her designer purses on eBay. The story spread from there. People began to talk. They whispered about the missing graduation. They whispered about the vacation photos that had been deleted from Instagram but lived on in screenshots. They whispered about the fact that my parents were suddenly putting their beloved boat up for sale. I heard about it from an old high school friend, Jenna, who called me one evening. Everyone knows. "Evelyn," Jenna said, her voice low as if she were sharing state secrets. "Lila tried to tell everyone you stole her inheritance." But then, well, people started doing the math. They realized you were the one supporting them for years. It is getting ugly for them. "I don't want to know," I said, and I meant it. "You should know that Lila is losing friends," Jenna continued, ignoring my request. "She asked Brittany for a loan last week. Brittany told her to get a job." I heard Lila screamed at her in the middle of the coffee shop. "That sounds like her?" I said. The collapse of the Moore dynasty was not loud or tragic. It was pathetic. Without my monthly transfers, the facade of their upper-middle-class life evaporated within 60 days. My father could no longer float the interest payments on his credit cards. My mother could no longer hide the reality of their finances behind expensive dinners. They had treated me like an infinite resource, never realizing that resources can be depleted. Now, they were facing the very thing they had always judged others for consequences. I did not feel happy about their struggle. I did not feel sad, either. I felt the clinical detachment of a scientist observing a chemical reaction. They had mixed greed with entitlement, and this was the inevitable explosion. I poured all my energy into my new role at the Vantage Point, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping first-generation students navigate the complexities of higher education. It was work that fed my soul. I spent my days talking to teenagers who were terrified and hopeful, kids who reminded me so much of my younger self. One afternoon, my boss, a perceptive woman named Clara, sat down in my office. "You stay late every night, Evelyn," she said gently. "You know you don't have to prove your worth here. Right. We value you for who you are, not just what you produce." I looked at her, startled. It was the first time an authority figure had told me that my existence was enough. "I know," I said, my voice thick with emotion. I am just enjoying the work. It feels good to build something that is actually mine." "Well, go home." She smiled. "Building a life includes resting." I took her advice. I went home to my quiet apartment. I bought a rug I liked, not one that would be practical for others. I cooked food I enjoyed. I started reading books for pleasure again. The silence that had once felt heavy now felt like a warm blanket. My phone no longer induced panic attacks. The blocked numbers in my settings remained blocked. I heard through the grapevine that my parents had listed the house I had grown up in, the house where I had learned that I was second best. They were downsizing to a rental 2 towns over. I did not offer to help move. I did not offer to store their boxes. I did not send a check. For the first time in 29 years, my bank account was growing. But more importantly, my sense of self was solidifying. I was no longer defined by their lack of love. I was defined by the boundaries I had finally gathered the courage to build. I was not a victim of the Moore family anymore. I was simply a bystander to their drama, watching from a safe, peaceful distance. The August sun was blazing down on the perfectly manicured lawn of the State University, but for the first time in my life, I did not feel the heat. I stood near the entrance of the freshman dormitory, watching a stream of 18-year-olds carry boxes, pillows, and hopes into their new lives. Among them was Maya Harris. She was struggling with a large plastic bin filled with textbooks, her face flushed with exertion and excitement. Behind her, David was carrying a mini-fridge, and Sarah was moving slowly but steadily with a cane, holding a potted plant. She looked different than the woman I had met in the wheelchair a year ago. Her hair was growing back in soft, gray curls, and her skin had lost that terrifying, translucent pallor. The medical trust had paid for the best specialists in the state, and while she wasn't cured, she was here. She was alive to see her daughter go to college. I stepped forward to help Maya with the bin. "Let me get that," I said. Maya turned, her eyes widening. "Evelyn, you came." She dropped the bin, fortunately. It was sturdy and threw her arms around me. It was a hug that knocked the wind out of me, desperate and grateful and real. "I wouldn't miss it," I said, squeezing her back. David set the fridge down and wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. He looked at me with eyes that were glassy with unshed tears. "We were just talking about you in the car," David said, his voice thick. I still wake up some mornings and check the bank account just to make sure it wasn't a dream. You know that? It is not a dream." "David." I smiled. He placed a hand on my shoulder. It was a fatherly gesture, heavy and warm. the kind I had watched other girls receive my entire life, but had never felt myself. He turned to a woman standing nearby, another parent who was wrestling with a duvet cover. "This is Evelyn," David told the stranger, beaming with pride. "She is the reason we are here. She changed our future. She is our angel." The stranger smiled at me. "That is a wonderful thing to be." I stood there, surrounded by the chaos of move-in day, and the memory of my own graduation washed over me. I remembered the silence of the auditorium. I remembered the 3 empty seats. I remembered the text message that had shattered my heart. That day had been cold, lonely, and defined by absence. But today was defined by presence. I looked at the Harris family. They were not my blood. We did not share a last name. We did not have a lifetime of memories. But they treated me with more reverence and kindness in 1 year than the Moores had in 29. I realized then that Aunt Beatrice had been right all along. A deserving family wasn't about DNA. It was about showing up. It was about sacrifice. It was about love that wasn't transactional. I had heard rumors about my parents and Lila. They were living in a small rental apartment. Lila was working as a receptionist at a dental office, a job she apparently hated and complained about daily on social media. My father was still angry. My mother was still playing the victim. They were still trapped in their cycle of entitlement and misery. But their anger felt distant now, like a storm happening on another continent. It could not touch me. I had built a fortress of self-respect, and they no longer had the keys to the gate. "We are going to grab lunch at the dining hall after we unpack," Sarah said, touching my arm gently. "Will you join us? It is on us." "Well, technically it is on the trust, but you know what I mean." She laughed, a bright, clear sound. "I would love to," I said, as I walked with them toward the dormitory, carrying a lamp and a bag of linens. I caught my reflection in the glass door of the building. I looked different too. My shoulders were back. My head was high. I wasn't the girl waiting for her parents to notice her anymore. I was the woman who had noticed herself. The $500,000 had found its home, and so had I. I didn't need a text message. I didn't need a beach vacation. I didn't need their approval. I smiled at my reflection, a genuine, easy smile that reached my eyes. I was finally, completely free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and let's share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Victoria Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit the hype button to help this story reach even more people.